Welcome to A1 Storyteller, where stories are more than just words. They're windows into real emotions, real struggles, and unforgettable triumphs. Here, we don't just tell stories. We peel back the layers of society, exposing injustice, celebrating resilience, and championing voices too often silenced. Our mission is simple: to move you, to wake you up, and to remind you that empathy is still alive. The story you're about to hear is not just a story, it's a reflection of the world we live in. It's a tale of love, injustice, racism, power, and the strength of a Black woman who stood her ground even when the odds were stacked against her. It's about a mother who shielded her child, a man who showed what a real protector looks like, and a system that was forced to answer for its failures. Too often, we hear about tragic endings, but not today. So sit back, turn up the volume, let your heart and mind open. This is a story you won't forget. Now, let's begin. Michelle Johnson awoke to sunlight spilling through the blinds of her modest home in suburban Atlanta. It was a rare and precious kind of morning, the kind that made you breathe slower, appreciate the quiet hum of life outside your window, and savor the warmth of your daughter snuggled next to you in bed. After 5 straight night shifts at the pediatric hospital, Michelle finally had a day off. No blaring alarms, no sterile hospital lights, no racing from room to room tending to crying infants and worried parents. Just her daughter Ava, and a morning full of possibilities. So Mommy Ava whispered, half awake, "Can we go to the park today?" Michelle smiled. "Of course we can, baby girl. You deserve it," with 7-year-old eyes lit up with joy. "Can I bring my soccer ball? You can bring too." The two of them got dressed in light, breezy clothes. Michelle wore a sunflower yellow sundress that complemented her caramel skin. Her curly hair pulled into a soft puff. Eva, already bursting with energy, wore her favorite glittery sneakers and a rainbow-colored headband. With a bag of snacks, sunscreen, and a bottle of water, they stepped out into the fresh spring air. The streets were quiet. Birds chirped from the trees. Neighbors waved from across lawns. Michelle felt something she hadn't felt in a while: ease. They walked hand in hand, a mother and daughter making their way to the nearby park just 3 blocks away. Laughter filled the air as Ava skipped ahead, kicking her soccer ball, occasionally tripping over it, and giggling uncontrollably. Michelle glanced around, soaking in the scene. This was her neighborhood, her community, her safe space. At least, that's what she believed, until he showed up. Officer Rick Halberd sat slouched behind the wheel of his police cruiser, nursing a lukewarm coffee and watching the slow life of suburbia unfold before him. So it was his routine: post up near the park, pretend to scan for speeders, and really just use the quiet time to bask in his own perceived authority. Rick was in his early 40s, white, stocky, and known around the department as old school. He'd been on the force for over 15 years, but his idea of policing hadn't evolved since the 90s. He saw himself as a gatekeeper, someone who had kept the wrong types from getting too comfortable in his neighborhood. Rick's jacket was thick with complaints, excessive force, racial profiling, verbal harassment. But every time, he walked away unscathed. A slap on the wrist here, a "don't do it again" there. Protected by a good old boy system that gave men like him unchecked power and zero accountability. When he spotted Michelle and Ava walking together, 2 Black figures moving through a predominantly white area, something in him tightened. It wasn't suspicion. It was prejudice. He lowered his aviator sunglasses and grunted, "What the hell is this?" To Rick, a Black woman walking peacefully with her child wasn't an image of motherhood. It was a challenge, an affront to the fantasy he clung to, the belief that people like Michelle didn't belong here, didn't thrive here. He flicked on his lights and slowly rolled the cruiser toward them, wheels crunching gravel with intention. He didn't know who they were, and frankly, he didn't care. He just needed to remind them who was in charge. "Hey, you two, stop right there." Michelle froze mid-step. Ava's soccer ball rolled ahead and stopped at the edge of the grass. She turned, heart quickening. The bright red and blue lights pulsed in the morning sun as the police cruiser parked diagonally in front of them. The engine cut off. A door slammed shut. Out stepped Officer Rick Halbert, his hand resting casually on his belt, far too close to the holster. "Is there a problem, officer? Is there a problem, officer?" Michelle asked, her voice calm but guarded. "Let me ask the questions," he said sharply, sizing them up. "Where are you two headed?" To the park," Michelle replied, gesturing toward the gate just 50 feet ahead. "We live nearby. My daughter and I come here every weekend." Rick took a step closer. "What's your name?" "Michelle Johnson." "Got ID?" Michelle hesitated. "We're walking. I didn't think I'd need it just to go outside." Rick sneered. "You people always think you're above the rules." His hand gripped Michelle's tighter. "Mommy." "It's okay, sweetheart," Michelle said softly, squeezing her hand. She reached into her purse slowly, mindful of every move, every breath. The last thing she needed was to become another headline. Rick snatched the ID from her hand, gave it a cursory glance. "This is a nice purse," he commented. "Or for this, you get this off the street?" Michelle's face hardened. "I'm a nurse. I bought it with my paycheck." "Oh, so you're one of the good ones, huh?" That line stung. Ava looked up, confused. Rick wasn't done. "You always take this route. You casing the neighborhood? Looking for an easy grab? Maybe teaching your daughter the trade early?" Michelle's eyes burned. "That's enough." Rick raised his voice, chest puffed. "What did you say?" "I said that's enough. You have my ID. We're not breaking any laws. You're scaring my daughter. I should scare her," Rick said coldly. "And maybe she'll grow up to follow the rules instead of thinking she can strut around like she owns the place." People at the park had begun to take notice. One young woman across the street took out her phone and started recording. Michelle noticed. So did Rick. Put that phone away," he barked. "Fee." The woman kept recording. Rick's face flushed red. His authority was being questioned, and he hated that more than anything. "I'm not saying another word without a lawyer," Michelle said. Her voice trembled, but it was steady, unbreakable. "You're harassing me in front of my child." And just then, she tapped twice on her smartwatch, activating the emergency alert she and her husband had set up. Miles would be there soon, and when he arrived, everything would change. Michelle tried to stay composed, even as her insides twisted with rage and fear. Her left hand clutched was tightly, shielding her daughter behind her body, while her right subtly tapped the side of her smartwatch twice. Ping. That was the signal. It wasn't a panic button linked to the police. Michelle had no faith they'd help her, especially with one of their own, as the threat. Honest, it was connected directly to her husband, Miles. Miles Johnson wasn't just a loving father and husband. He was a former Marine Force recon, highly trained in surveillance, defense, and critical threat response. These days, he worked in private security, training corporate teams and political figures on what to do in high-risk situations. He was calm, tactical, and when it came to his family, deadly serious. Miles had made it crystal clear. "If you ever feel unsafe, even a little, tap the watch. I don't care if it turns out to be nothing. You will be there." He kept his promise. Back at his home office, Miles saw the alert on his phone and dropped everything. He didn't need details. He didn't need context. His wife, his daughter, a park, an emergency signal, that was enough. In under a minute, he was behind the wheel of his armored black Escalade, tires screeching as he pulled out of the driveway and flew down the street like a bullet fired from a cannon. Michelle kept her eyes on Officer Halbert as he paced slowly, trying to intimidate her. Eva was sniffling, tears streaming down her cheeks, hiding behind her mother's skirt, every second stretched out like an eternity. Rick leaned in again. "If you're so innocent, what are you nervous about?" "Huh?" Michelle didn't flinch. "Minch. Because you're a grown man with a gun, harassing a mother and child for walking to a park. Rick clicked his tongue. See, it's that attitude. That's why people like me have to keep people like you in line. Then they heard it, the low growl of a powerful engine. Michelle turned her head and saw the black Escalade whip around the corner and stop with purpose. Out stepped Miles Johnson, all 6'3" of him, broad-chested, wearing a dark gray tactical polo and jeans. His footsteps were calm, but the tension in his shoulders said he was ready for war. His face lit up instantly. "Daddy!" She broke away from Michelle's side and ran toward him. Miles knelt and scooped her into his arms, holding her tight, his eyes never leaving the officer. Michelle walked to meet him, arms wrapping protectively around her daughter's back as Miles stood between them and Rick. Rick's jaw tightened. "And who the hell are you supposed to be?" Miles stared him down, eyes cool and level. "I'm the man whose wife and child you're harassing." Rick scoffed. They fit the description, walking around suspiciously. Miles stepped forward, his voice a low growl. Walking around. Suspiciously. You stopped a mother and a child walking to a public park. You demanded ID without probable cause. You verbally assaulted them. And now you're doubling down, thinking you're untouchable. "I'm not afraid of you," Rick sneered. He flinched. Miles didn't have to raise his voice. His composure was unnerving, but Rick wasn't used to being confronted, especially not by someone who looked like Miles. He reached for his radio to call backup. That's when another car pulled up. A sleek, unmarked vehicle. Out stepped a tall black man in uniform, eyes hidden behind mirrored sunglasses. He moved with authority. Sharp, deliberate. Rick's face drained of color. Deputy Chief Alonzo Briggs. Briggs. Deputy Chief Briggs was not a man to mess with. A 20-year veteran of the force, former JAG officer, and highly respected in Atlanta law enforcement. He had earned a reputation for cleaning up messes and for being utterly allergic to corruption. He had also served in Afghanistan with Miles. As he walked up, his badge gleamed in the sun. "Rick," Briggs said coolly, a step away from the Johnson family. Rick stammered, still holding his radio. "Sir, I was just watched the footage on my way here." Briggs pulled out his phone and pressed play. A bystander's recording played clearly the way Rick barked, accused, and insulted, the racial undertones, the threats, the unnecessary aggression, and Ava crying in the background. Briggs looked up, stone-faced. "Do you know how many complaints are in your file, Officer Halberd?" Rick didn't answer. 17. All buried. All dismissed. "But today's different. Today you got caught." "Sir, with respect. I'm not asking for respect. I'm giving you an order. Hand me your badge." Rick's face turned red. "You're suspending me? You're taking her word over mine?" Briggs stepped closer, and not just hers, the video, the witnesses, your own body cam, which, by the way, you turned off. That's a violation of department policy. Michelle stood silent, Ava clinging to her. Miles stepped beside them, nodding his thanks to Briggs. Rick reached into his vest pocket and handed over his badge with trembling hands. Briggs took it without another word, then nodded to two plainclothes officers who had just arrived. They escorted Rick to the unmarked cruiser. As Rick was led away, his eyes met Michelle's. He looked humiliated. She looked like justice. The crowd slowly began to disperse, murmurs of disbelief and outrage still hanging in the air. Though Officer Halberd had been taken away, the emotional damage lingered. Miles carried Ava in his arms as they walked back to the car. She wasn't talking, just clinging to his neck, her small fingers locked around his shirt collar. Michelle walked beside them, her hand resting on her daughter's back. When they reached the car, Miles gently set Ava in the back seat. Before buckling her in, he crouched down to her level. "Are you okay, Peanut?" he asked gently. Ava blinked up at him. "Daddy, why did that man yell at Mommy?" Miles took a long breath. Because some people judge others by their skin color instead of their heart. And sometimes they're given power they don't deserve. "Oh, was he a bad guy?" Miles looked into her eyes. Yes, but we stopped him. And you were very brave. Oh, bitter lip. I was scared. Michelle reached into the back seat and hugged her tight. It's okay to be scared. You're never alone. Mommy and Daddy will always protect you. Always. Ava finally smiled again, just a little, and nodded. That moment sealed something between them. A silent promise. No matter what the world threw at them, they would rise together. That night, the Johnson home was quiet but warm. Michelle tucked Ava into bed early, her little girl clinging to a stuffed unicorn and murmuring something about superheroes. In the living room, Michelle poured 2 mugs of tea and sat down beside him. How'd you know where we were so fast? She asked. Miles smiled. I always know where you are. Location ping came through with the watch alert. I hate that she saw that, Michelle whispered, tears starting to form. She's 7. She's 7. She shouldn't have to learn about hate like that. Miles took her hand. But she also learned what standing up looks like, what protection looks like, what justice can look like. And she saw her mom never back down. Michelle's lips trembled. You do think anything will happen to that cop? To that cop? I do, he said. Not just because he was wrong, but because now the world saw it too. Michelle nodded slowly. I just wanted her to play in the sun. She will, Miles whispered, wrapping his arm around her shoulders. And next time, the sun's gonna shine a little brighter. By morning, the footage had gone viral. Across social media, millions viewed the now infamous video. A racist cop cornering a black mother and child in broad daylight, spitting vile accusations, until the child's father appeared, calm but formidable, and the tide turned. Justice for Michelle began trending. Major news outlets picked up the story. Civil rights groups issued statements. Parents across the country expressed heartbreak and outrage. Even celebrities reposted the footage, praising Michelle's composure and Miles' protective presence. Within 24 hours, the mayor issued a public statement. What happened to Michelle Johnson and her daughter was unacceptable. We are launching an independent investigation into Officer Halberd's conduct, and we're committed to systemic reform. A Deputy Chief Briggs called Miles personally. He's suspended pending termination, Briggs said. Internal Affairs wants to speak with both of you if you're willing. We're willing, Miles replied. But understand, we're not looking for revenge. We're looking for change. Pause. Then let's make it happen. A week later, Michelle stood before a crowd at a local town hall meeting. She was nervous, but she refused to stay silent. Behind her sat Miles and her anchors. Cameras rolled. Reporters scribbled notes. My name is Michelle Johnson, she began. I'm a nurse. A mother, a wife, and a human being. The room was silent. What happened to me and my daughter wasn't an isolated incident. It's part of a pattern, a system that allows bias and hate to hide behind a badge. But we're here to say no more, she continued, her voice growing stronger. My daughter is 7. She should fear monsters in books, not the people sworn to protect us. I didn't choose this moment. It chose me. But now that we're here, I will use my voice forever for every mother who's been silenced, for every child who's been scared. The crowd erupted in applause. After the speech, people lined up to hug her, to thank her, to tell their own stories. Michelle walked out of the building with her family, the cool night breeze wrapping around them. And for the first time in a long time, she felt something powerful. Hope. This was more than a story. This was a reminder that racism isn't always hidden in shadows. It sometimes wears a uniform and a badge. But even in the face of abuse, fear, and injustice, truth stands taller. Michelle stood for her daughter. Miles showed the world what a real protector looks like. And together they forced a broken system to look in the mirror. At A1 Storyteller, we bring you these powerful moments, true reflections of the world around us, because stories like these don't just entertain. They awaken. They inspire. They ignite change. Whoa, they ignite change. If this story moved you, don't just watch, share it. Talk about it. Stand up. For justice. For love. For every voice that deserves to be heard. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell, because the next story could be the one that opens someone's eyes. Until next time, stay brave, stay bold. This is A1 Storyteller, where truth has a voice.